If you've ever stood on a beach and stared at the horizon, you know that feeling, the ocean stretching on forever. Now imagine flying hundreds of miles out into that horizon, far past where land disappears, and suddenly spotting what looks like a floating city. That's the world's biggest offshore oil rig. It isn't just a drilling platform, it's a self-contained world of steel, fire, and noise, with hundreds of people working, eating, and sleeping in the middle of the sea. Most people picture oil rigs as tall metal towers jutting out of the water, but this one is different. It's massive, more like a small industrial town than a platform. Elevators shuttle workers between decks. Helicopters land and take off from its pad. Cafeterias serve hot meals 24/7. And far below, enormous drills bite into the seabed, pulling up resources that keep whole economies moving. Life out here is nothing like life on shore. The rig never sleeps. There's always the hum of machinery, the rumble of engines, the clatter of steel on steel. Everyone on board has a job, from welders and crane operators to medics and cooks, and every role matters. The days and nights blur together, and you can't just step away for a break. This is home for weeks at a time. That builds its own kind of culture, tight-knit, sometimes tense, but built on trust and resilience. Just getting here is an experience in itself. For most, it starts with a helicopter ride over endless blue. The first sight of the rig is surreal. Cranes swinging, flare stacks burning, waves crashing against towering steel legs. It feels like you've landed on another planet. And this city at sea has to survive some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Storms are routine, not rare. Waves taller than houses slam into its sides. Hurricane-force winds howl through its beams. Yet the rig holds steady, operating day and night. It's not just engineering, it's human determination made real. But it isn't all noise and chaos. On clear nights, standing on the upper deck gives you a view of the stars like you've never seen before, brilliant skies stretching over endless water. It's a reminder of how small you are, even when you're standing on one of humanity's largest machines. That's what makes life on the world's biggest rig so fascinating. It's not just about oil, it's about people, endurance, and the strange beauty of living on the edge of the sea. In the next sections, we'll step inside this world. How crews live day to day, how meals are made for hundreds, what it feels like to ride out a storm, and what life is really like cut off from land for weeks at a time. When people picture life on the world's biggest offshore oil rig, they usually imagine noise, grease, and endless machinery. That's true, but it leaves out the most important part: the people. This floating city in the middle of the ocean is home to hundreds of workers, and their daily routines shape the heartbeat of the entire rig. A typical day starts before sunrise. The night shift hands off to the day crew, and for a few minutes, the rig feels like an airport at dawn. People clutching coffee mugs, helmets under their arms, trading quick updates before heading off. Shifts are strict. 12 hours long, no excuses. Out here, being late doesn't just mean someone has to cover for you, it could affect the safety of the whole operation. On one end of the rig, roughnecks work, the drill floor, the heart of the operation. It's hot, loud, and dangerous, with every move carefully choreographed. Workers wear heavy protective gear because everyone knows how high the stakes are. A single mistake with a drill, string, or suspended load could be disastrous. Meanwhile, in offices on the other side of the rig, engineers and geologists sit in front of screens, monitoring data, pressures, and samples. It looks almost like a corporate office, except the view out the window is nothing but endless blue. But life here isn't only about work. Meal times are sacred. The galley is where everyone eventually crosses paths, from welders to medics to supervisors. The cooks are unsung heroes, serving bacon and eggs at dawn, or surprising the crew with steak night or Taco Tuesday. Food isn't just fuel, it's morale. A good meal can turn a rough shift around. After eating, workers scatter, some to their bunks, others to smoke on deck or call home if the Wi-Fi holds. The living quarters are small, think college dorms, but tighter, with bunk beds and little personal space. Headphones, movies, or a deck of cards help pass the time. Bigger rigs even have small gyms, which double as stress relief and a cure for cabin fever. Evenings carry their own rhythm. Sunsets at sea are breathtaking, and for a few minutes, workers gather at the railings, snapping photos to send home. Then the cycle continues. The night shift takes over, the machinery roars back to full swing, and the rig keeps turning. Life here is repetitive, but that's what keeps it steady. People adapt by creating small traditions. Birthday cakes, Christmas tinsel in the dining hall, cheering when a soccer match finally streams without cutting out. In this isolated world, the smallest joys matter. And through it all, there's an unspoken rule. Everyone depends on each other. Friendships form fast. Disagreements get resolved quickly because there's nowhere else to go. Out here, cooperation isn't optional, it's survival. Daily life on the rig is hard, demanding, and anything but glamorous. But it's also full of camaraderie, resilience, and the bond of people sharing one of the toughest jobs on Earth. Together, they turn a steel platform in the ocean into something more, a community. If you were dropped blindfolded onto the deck of the world's biggest offshore oil rig, the moment you pulled that blindfold off, you'd probably think you were standing in the middle of a small industrial city. The scale is almost impossible to process at first. You're surrounded by towering cranes that swing steel containers like they're toy blocks, pipes as thick as tree trunks snaking in every direction, and the constant hum of machinery that never really stops. Out here, silence doesn't exist. The heartbeat of the rig is a constant vibration under your boots, as if the whole platform is alive. Let's talk about size for a second, because big doesn't really do it justice. The structure itself is larger than many skyscrapers laid flat. Some rigs stretch more than 300 meters across and rise dozens of stories above the sea. The steel legs supporting it are buried deep into the ocean floor, anchored with massive piles that can withstand not only the weight of the platform, but also the pounding of waves and shifting currents. If you stacked some of the rig's modules on top of each other, they'd rival some of the tallest buildings in major cities. And here's the kicker, this entire floating giant is designed not only to survive, but to stay stable in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Now, beneath that enormous steel skeleton lies the lifeline of the operation: drilling systems. Picture drill bits that are capable of chewing through thousands of meters of rock under the ocean floor. These aren't your average drills. We're talking about assemblies that weigh tons, supported by derricks, the tall, tower-like structures that dominate the skyline of the rig. From the derrick, pipes called drill strings are lowered down, connecting section after section until they reach the oil reservoir. And remember, that reservoir could be buried beneath layers of sand, salt, and solid rock, sometimes up to 3 miles below the seabed. Every piece of this process is coordinated down to the smallest detail, because even the slightest mistake can mean millions of dollars lost, or worse, a catastrophic accident. Walking through the engineering decks feels like stepping into the engine room of a massive spaceship. Rows of compressors, pumps, and turbines roar at full throttle, powering everything from the drilling equipment to the living quarters. These machines don't get breaks. They run 24 hours a day, monitored constantly by engineers whose job is to keep the rig humming without interruption. Redundant systems are everywhere. You'll see backup generators, secondary pumps, and multiple safety valves, because out here, failure isn't just inconvenient, it's life-threatening. One of the most jaw-dropping parts of the rig is the blowout preventer, or BOP. This is essentially the rig's failsafe, a giant stack of valves sitting on the seabed at the mouth of the well. If pressure suddenly spikes and oil threatens to shoot uncontrolled up the drill pipe, the BOP can seal the well shut in seconds. Imagine a steel machine as big as a small house, capable of slicing through solid drill pipe like scissors through paper, just to stop a blowout. That's the level of force and precision we're talking about. And then there's the logistics of keeping the rig supplied. Think about the scale. Thousands of tons of equipment, miles of cable, endless quantities of fuel, water, and chemicals. Helicopters shuttle people in and out, while supply ships haul in food, spare parts, and heavy gear. The rig itself has storage tanks large enough to hold millions of gallons of processed oil or gas before it's transferred via pipelines or tankers. Every single detail has to be tracked. If one part goes missing or one valve malfunctions, the entire operation can grind to a halt. The engineering marvel isn't just in the drilling, it's in making the whole place livable. Beneath the noise and steel, there's an entire infrastructure designed to support hundreds of people. Electricity, air conditioning, plumbing, all of it has to be generated and maintained in the middle of the ocean. Imagine the power grid of a small town. Only here, it's powered by gas turbines and diesel engines tucked away in humming machinery rooms. Clean water is produced on-site using desalination systems that strip salt out of seawater, and waste has to be carefully processed so nothing contaminates the ocean. It's not just a work site, it's a completely self-contained city floating miles from land. And the crazy part? All of this has to keep running while the rig is being battered by wind, waves, and salt air that corrodes everything it touches. Engineers spend as much time maintaining the rig as they do operating it. Protective coatings, regular inspections, and non-stop repairs are part of the daily grind. Something as simple as a rusty bolt can become a major hazard if ignored. So the maintenance teams are constantly on the move, checking, tightening, and fixing before problems have a chance to snowball. At the heart of it all, though, is coordination. There's a control room often compared to the bridge of a ship, or even a NASA mission control, where banks of monitors display every detail of the operation. Drilling depth, pressure levels, machinery status, weather data, it's all fed into the screens, and trained eyes watch for anything out of the ordinary. If you want to understand the rig in one image, picture that room. Engineers with headsets, watching glowing data streams that represent the invisible forces at work, thousands of meters below the ocean floor. It's science, engineering, and human intuition all rolled into one. The scale of this machinery is staggering, but the real awe comes when you realize that all of it exists just to make the invisible visible. Oil and gas trapped miles underground, inaccessible without this web of steel, engineering, and human grit, is suddenly pulled to the surface and harnessed. It's a reminder of both our ingenuity and our dependence on these resources, and of how much effort it takes just to keep the lights on in the world we take for granted. If there's one thing you quickly realize out here, it's that the galley, the kitchen, and dining area of the rig isn't just a place to eat. It's the heartbeat of the whole community. Forget about fancy entertainment halls, shopping malls, or nightlife. On an oil rig, the dining room is where everything happens. It's where crews swap stories, where friendships are cemented, where complaints get aired, and where everyone, no matter their job, sits down as equals at long tables with trays full of food. Meals are a big deal because they break up the monotony of shifts. When you're working 12 hours in biting wind, the thought of a hot meal is what keeps you moving. That's why the chefs on these rigs are treated like low-key rock stars. Their job isn't easy, feeding hundreds of workers every single day, 3 meals a day, in the middle of the ocean. Food supplies don't just magically appear. Everything is flown in by helicopter or brought on supply vessels that dock with the rig. That means planning has to be military-level precise. You can't just run to the store if you run out of eggs. In the first couple of weeks after a resupply, life feels a little luxurious. The salad bar is full of crisp lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and bright peppers. Breakfasts come with trays of fresh fruit, apples, bananas, oranges. You might even catch the smell of fresh bread coming out of the oven. But as the days stretch on, reality sets in. Fresh produce only lasts so long in the salty air and humid storage rooms. Eventually, the crisp lettuce wilts, the bananas brown, and the apples go soft. That's when frozen, canned, and vacuum-packed goods become the stars of the menu. But here's the thing. The chefs get creative. You might not have garden-fresh vegetables anymore, but you'll still get a steaming bowl of hearty stew, a plate of pasta dripping with sauce, or a curry that could rival a restaurant on shore. Workers often say the food is better than what they get at home, and there's a reason for that. Management knows morale depends on the quality of meals. You can't expect someone to climb a 200-foot derrick in freezing wind or handle heavy machinery for 12 hours straight if they're running on bland or skimpy meals. Good food isn't just comfort, it's fuel. The dining area itself has a strange vibe. On one hand, it's bustling with chatter during peak meal times, people clanking trays, swapping jokes, talking about soccer scores or the latest movie they caught during downtime. On the other hand, it's also the closest thing to normal life most of these workers get for weeks. Sitting in a bright, clean cafeteria with coffee machines humming in the corner and posters on the wall, reminding you of safety drills, it almost feels like a university campus dining hall, except everyone here is wearing steel-toed boots and flame-retardant coveralls. Now, when it comes to comfort, let's be clear. This is no luxury cruise ship. Cabins are usually shared 2 to 4 people crammed into a small space with bunk beds, lockers, and maybe a desk if you're lucky. The constant hum of generators and machinery means silence is rare. Earplugs and noise-canceling headphones are worth their weight in gold. And privacy? Forget it. Every inch of space is designed for efficiency, not personal comfort. But the rig does make an effort. There's usually a rec room with a TV, maybe a pool table, sometimes even a small gym. Workers will tell you that those little spaces save your sanity. After a grueling shift, you can't just collapse in bed. You need a moment to unwind, whether that's lifting a few weights, watching a soccer match, or playing cards with your bunkmates. Then there's the mental side of survival. Being away from family for weeks at a time is tough. For many, it's the hardest part of the job. That's why communication systems are a lifeline. These days, most rigs have decent internet connections, though the bandwidth isn't built for endless Netflix binges or online gaming marathons. Still, even a short video call home makes the isolation bearable. Imagine being thousands of miles from shore, with nothing but waves in every direction, and then suddenly seeing your kid's smile pop up on a tablet screen. Those little moments recharge you in ways no coffee ever could. And let's not forget the rituals that develop around food and downtime. Friday nights often mean themed dinners, maybe a barbecue night, taco night, or even steak and lobster, if the supply boats brought something special. Birthdays are celebrated with sheet cakes big enough to feed 100 people. Holidays are bittersweet, but the kitchen goes all out. Roast turkey at Christmas, maybe even a tree and decorations in the mess hall. It's never quite the same as being home, but for many, it's close enough to feel like a family gathering. So when people ask, how do you survive out there? The answer isn't just toughness or skill. It's food, comfort, and community. It's the smell of coffee in the early hours of a night shift. It's laughing with your crewmates over a badly told joke while you shovel down pasta. It's celebrating small milestones together, finding normality in the middle of the ocean. That's what keeps people grounded when the ocean feels endless and the days blur together. When people imagine working on an offshore oil rig, they often picture the paychecks, the massive machinery, or maybe even the helicopter ride out. What they don't always think about are the nights when the ocean itself seems determined to swallow the rig whole. Out here in the middle of nowhere, storms don't just come and go, they arrive like armies, armed with howling winds, sheets of rain, and waves that can rise higher than a small building. And when they do, the crew doesn't get to pack up and go home. They stay, they work, they ride it out. The first sign of an incoming storm usually comes long before the sky darkens. Rig supervisors keep a constant eye on weather reports, satellite feeds, and old-fashioned horizon watching. If conditions begin to shift, the entire operation changes gears. Crews secure equipment, tie down loose materials, and make sure every tool and vehicle is where it should be. Even something as simple as a ladder or an open hatch could turn deadly if tossed around by gale force winds. For the greenhorns, the new guys on their first hitch, this ritual is eye-opening. For veterans, it's muscle memory. They've done it dozens of times, but that doesn't mean they take it lightly. When the storm finally arrives, the rig becomes a fortress under siege. Rain lashes sideways against steel, wind screams through the scaffolding, and the deck pitches just enough to keep you on edge. Inside, the vibrations and groans of the structure are a reminder that even the biggest engineering marvels in the world are still at the mercy of nature. It's surreal to sit in the mess hall eating dinner while you can feel the entire rig shudder like a living thing. For newcomers, sleep on storm nights is almost impossible. Bunks creak, walls rattle, and every noise feels like it might be something breaking. But for veterans, it's oddly comforting proof that the rig is doing what it's designed to do: bend, flex, and endure. Of course, storms aren't the only risks. Fire is a constant fear on oil rigs, and every crew member is trained to respond like a firefighter. Onshore, a kitchen fire might mean calling the fire department. Out here, there's no one to call. The fire department is you and the people you work with. That's why the rig is equipped with advanced detection systems, foam sprayers, and emergency shutoffs, and why drills are taken so seriously. Everyone knows that hesitation, even for a moment, could cost lives. Medical emergencies add another layer of risk. While rigs always have trained medics on board and fully stocked infirmaries, they're still hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital. A serious injury could mean waiting for a helicopter evacuation if the weather even allows it. That reality keeps safety at the forefront of every task, whether it's tightening bolts at dizzying heights or handling volatile chemicals in tight quarters. Accidents do happen, but the culture of responsibility is so ingrained that everyone knows their role if something goes wrong. And yet, despite all the danger, resilience is the defining trait of these crews. They don't just endure the storms, they come out stronger after each one. When the wind finally calms and the sea flattens back into glass, there's a kind of quiet pride that settles over the rig. Everyone knows they've just gone toe-to-toe with forces beyond their control, and they're still standing. That bond isn't something you can fake. It's forged in sleepless nights, in drills that feel endless, in shared jokes shouted over the howl of the wind. For outsiders, it's hard to grasp why anyone would sign up for this. But for those who call the rig home, the risks aren't just part of the job, they're part of the identity. They're reminders that this life isn't ordinary, and neither are the people tough enough to live it. Out here, resilience isn't just a word, it's survival. When you step back and look at the world's biggest offshore oil rig, it's easy to be caught up in the raw scale of it all. The endless pipes, the clattering machinery, the towering cranes that seem to scrape the sky. But the real story here isn't just the steel and engineering. It's the connection between this floating city and nearly every aspect of modern life. From the fuel in your car, to the plastics in your headphones, to the heating that keeps homes warm on winter nights. Much of it can be traced back to rigs like this, standing guard far out at sea. For the crew, though, that thought is often in the background. They're too busy making sure things run smoothly, day by day, job by job. But they know deep down that their work has a ripple effect, stretching thousands of miles away. A small problem here can trigger a supply chain shock that hits gas stations and factories around the world. A shutdown in production might sound like a corporate headache, but on the scale of the global economy, it's a domino that can topple whole industries. And so, these men and women live with a constant reminder. Their work matters more than they sometimes realize. There's also a human side to this story that goes beyond oil barrels and profit margins. Spend enough time listening to rig workers, and you'll notice a common thread. They talk about sacrifice, about missing birthdays, anniversaries, and even funerals because they're weeks away in the middle of the ocean. They talk about loneliness in quiet moments, staring out at a sea that stretches endlessly in every direction. But they also talk about pride. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that what they do keeps entire countries moving. When you flick on a light, when you turn the ignition, when you power up your laptop, chances are someone on an oil rig had a hand in making it possible. And yet, this story also comes with an awareness of change. Offshore oil rigs, no matter how massive or advanced, exist in a world where energy is being rethought. Renewable power, environmental concerns, and debates about sustainability are shaping the future. For some workers, that sparks uncertainty. Will rigs like this still be around in 30 years? Will their kids grow up working offshore like they did? Or will they find careers in wind, solar, or something else entirely? These questions hang heavy in the air, even as the work continues day and night. Still, there's something timeless about what happens here. People have always braved the elements in search of resources. Fishermen, sailors, explorers. Oil rigs are simply the modern chapter of that same story, written in steel instead of wood, with hard hats instead of sails. And the men and women who keep them running are carrying forward that tradition of resilience, courage, and adaptation. They're living proof that even in the harshest environments, humans can build, endure, and thrive. So when the helicopter finally lifts off and carries a worker back to shore after a long hitch, they leave behind more than just a workplace. They leave behind a monument to human determination, a place where technology and tenacity meet the wild, unforgiving ocean. For the outside world, it might just be an oil platform. But for the people who call it home, even for a few weeks at a time, it's a world of its own. Life on the world's biggest offshore oil rig is hard. It's isolating, it's dangerous, but it's also inspiring. Because at the end of the day, it shows what people are capable of when they're pushed to their limits, not just in body, but in spirit. And that's why rigs like this matter. Not only because they fuel the world, but because they remind us of the grit, resilience, and sheer stubbornness that keeps humanity moving forward, no matter how strong the wind blows, no matter how rough the sea gets.